We will go now for another text of the Talmud in Masechet Berachot on page Dalet, another one regarding King David. The last times we learned about the greatness of David HaMelech in many ways. Last night we learned about his scientific knowledge in building an instrument, a musical instrument that was able to catch the wind of the midnight, and once the sound of his harp emitted its musical sound, at midnight exactly King David woke up. And then he started to learn Torah till dawn, Amud HaShachar. And that's when he was very busy with taking care of the matters of his government, such as how to provide parnasa, livelihood for his people Israel. And then his advice was to go to war. Of course, they were already in the midst of a war, but that was a way how to supply the Jewish people with what they need in food and as well as in properties. We also discussed a few nights ago that David HaMelech did not sleep. And tonight we are going to learn another trait of his character regarding his piousness and his humility, his humbleness. And that will be all, and then we will pass to other different subjects in the Talmud. So, the text that I chose tonight begins with the words Le David, Shomra nafshi ki hasid ani. That's a quotation from the book of Tehillim, that David was the author, of course. And here David says to Hashem, Shomra nafshi, protect my soul, ki hasid ani, because I am righteous. Of course, people will immediately ask the question, what is he saying? I mean, is a righteous person supposed to testify on himself that he is a righteous man? Rather, it's not humility, it's rather the opposite. When somebody says, I am righteous, right? So we have to understand this, that when we talk to God, there is another pasuk in Tehillim that says, Adonai malach geut lavesh, which means Hashem is the supreme king and He's the only one by whom there is pride and there is haughtiness. You understand? In the sense not of arrogance, but haughtiness, grandioseness. In this kind of condition, one could speak to Hashem freely and say to Him, you know that I am righteous. Of course, this is something that we cannot tell to each other, because if you tell me that you are righteous, then I will say you are not righteous. Because one is supposed to be a little bit humble, not to think that he is a righteous man. Nobody should think of himself that he is perfect. Chassid, in the words of Tehillim, means perfect. Chassid means pious. Today, Chassid means somebody who lives in Williamsburg or in Crown Heights. No, the real meaning of Chassid means piousness. In fact, Chassid is a higher level than Tzaddik. While Tzaddik means righteous, Chassid means pious. What's the difference? In fact, the people of the Musar, Chachmei HaMusar, the sages of Musar, such as Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lotzato, he writes in his book, and others also, Sha'arei Tshuva of Rabbeinu Yonah, and other books, they say that the difference between Chassid and Tzaddik is this. It's primarily the Mesilat Yesharim who says that. Tzaddik is a person who fights. He doesn't want to sin. So he's trying to control himself and to curb his desires and to win and to defeat his Yetzerara. So it's a constant war. That's a tzaddik. A tzaddik is a person, a righteous man, who always fights with himself. I mean, we should wish to be like that. But there is a higher level. That's a chassid. A higher level, this high level of chassid means that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is already in his control. Which means Satan does not bother him anymore. This man has won in this life. Which means, not that he is not bothered by the Yetzer Hara, by the evil inclination, it's impossible. Because then you lose your free will. But then, he became so elevated that for him, to follow what the evil inclination is telling him would be very petty. Let's say that the Yetzer Hara comes to you and he says, let's go to watch a football game instead of learning Torah. You know, when you are in that kind of society and your friends are going, it will be very difficult to resist the temptation, right? So if you resist and you fight yourself, knowing that you are going to lose that football game, so that you will not lose your shiur of Torah, you are considered a tzaddik. If you do this in all the mitzvot, then you are really a tzaddik. But a chassid is a person who doesn't have to look upon this as something desirous. You tell him, let's assume, let's take Rav Ovadia Yosef, maybe even Rav Eliashiv, the great posek. Tell him, hey Rabbi, let's go to a football game. He's going to laugh at you. What are you talking about? For him, and not because he's old, because he is already on such a level that for him this is such a meaningless endeavor. It's so petty. So that's the way a chassid looks upon all the things that cause us problems with our evil inclination. You understand the point? That's how the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lotzato, in his book Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just, that's how he describes the difference between tzaddik and chassid. Which means chassid is the highest level. Now this, nobody can tell his friend, I am a chassid in this vein, because that would be immediately a proof that he is not. But when you're talking to God, it's okay. Because God knows your heart. So he knows, he cannot lie to Hashem. So David is saying to Hashem, please protect me, because you know I am a chassid. Which means David has reached that level in which the evil inclination does not bother him so much, even though he has an evil inclination, but he has curbed it so many times that now it's easy for him to curb it. You understand the point? To the best of my ability, how to explain that. Of course, people who know about the history of King David are going to find what I am saying a little bit unreasonable, because we all know that David HaMelech, King David, is famous because of the sin that he committed with Bathsheba, with the Eshet Ish, Bathsheba, a married woman. So, number one, we have to tell you what the Talmud tells us about it. Very quickly, even though this deserves by a special lecture by itself. But the Gemara says, Kola Omer David Chata Enoi La To'eh. There is a statement in the Talmud Masechet Baba Metziah, where it says, anybody who thinks that King David really sinned, the sin of married woman, is very wrong. Our sages have established this kind of understanding. You could be sure that they investigated the matter of David HaMelech. I mean, it is not difficult to understand, because when you read his book of Tehillim, who can write such a book if he really committed such a sacrilegious act? So what happened really with Bathsheba is a different story. The Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin tells us, but that's not the lecture, that's not the subject. So I just want you to believe that King David did not really sin. Our sages said that she was not married then. Why? Because her husband died. When he died, automatically she was free for him. So of course you could always ask me, how come the prophet then accused him? Natan and Navi came and they accused him that he sinned as a married woman. Our sages explain that the prophet, vis-a-vis the greatness of King David, was very strict with him. What about what? Did he sin or not? The point is like this, that he did send her husband to the war where he found his death No question about it. Why? It's another question. Because apparently he did act, the husband of Bathsheba, Uriah HaHitti, acted against King David in certain way that he deserved death. And yet David HaMelech did not really execute him. He sent him to war where it was almost sure that he will lose his life. But at the same time we know that he became infatuated with Bathsheba. With this combination, the rumor spread that he did it so he can take his wife. The truth is that if we know the true heart of King David, you know that it's impossible. Because he could have killed him if he wanted as a king, because of what he did. And yet he didn't do it. All he did was to give him the chance, maybe God will save him. And nevertheless, people are extremely harsh when it comes to judging others, especially when they judge a king. So that's why the prophet came and he said to him, you did commit that crime. He did not, but because the people thought, some of them thought and believed the rumor, now King David is to be accused. You think it's not fair. By the way, it's not fair. But when we talk about great and special people, it could even be fair, even though he did not commit anything. Just the fact that this happened, he was to be punished for it. And David HaMelech was punished, by the way. All this does not mean much, because David HaMelech did the greatest teshuvah that anybody has done. In fact, our sages said, how come King David committed such a thing, whether in the way I explained it, or in the way as we read it in the Bible, to teach the people of Israel how to do teshuvah. You know, in order to do teshuvah, you have to commit a sin, right? Otherwise, if you have no sin, there is no teshuvah. But to teach the people of Israel to do teshuvah, that's why King David did the whole thing. Whether it is in the sense, in the figurative sense, as I have explained, or if you want, for it's exactly the way it is reported in the Bible. So, our sages said, don't believe that he sinned. He really did not sin. And by the way, if he writes in the book of Tehillim what he said here, Le David shomra nafshi ki chasid ani. God, you know I am pious, I am chasid. Can he lie to God? If he did commit a crime like this, would he say such a thing? That's another proof. But the Talmud is taking this to a different direction. Forget everything that we said until now, this evening. The Talmud is taking this, the explanation of this verse that King David is saying to Hashem, Le David shomra nafshi ki chasid ani. Please God, protect me because I am chasid, which means I am righteous, of the higher level. Our sages debated regarding this. So let's see in the text. Rabbi Levi and Rabbi Yitzchak, two sages. One is Rabbi Levi, one of the great in the time between the time of the sages of the Mishnah and the sages of the Gemara, was Rabbi Levi. He was at the time of the father of Shmuel, Avoh di Shmuel, and Shmuel was the first generation of the sages of the Gemara. So we understand that Levi was at that time approximately, that puts him in between the time of the sages of the Mishnah, which concluded with Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and then the time of Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Shmuel in Babylon. So Levi and Rabbi Yitzchak, those two great sages, explained this pasuk in such a way. Chad Amar, one said, Kach Amar David lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel Olam. See, Resh Bet Shin Ayin is an acronym for Ribono shel Olam. Lo Chasid Ani, שכל מלכי מזרח ומערב ישנים עד 3 שעות ואני חצות לילה אקום להודות לך. So let's first explain the opinion of Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi is explaining what did he mean, David, when he said to David, Hashem, protect me because I am Chassid. What did he mean? So according to Rabbi Levi, King David is turning to Hashem and he says to him, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, am I not Chassid? Am I not righteous in your eyes? Come on. Don't you see that all the kings of the world, Mizrach Ma'arab, of the east of the world and the west of the world, all the kings, they sleep, Habibi, they snore up to 3 hours from the beginning of the day. Which means if the day begins at 6 o'clock, they sleep even over 9 o'clock in the morning. And I, when do I wake up to greet you, Hashem? Hatzot, the pasuk that we learned yesterday. Hatzot laila akum leodot lach. I wake up at midnight to serve you. So who's better? The kings of the universe, of all the world, or me? So don't you find me better than all of them? That's according to the interpretation of Rabbi Levi, what David meant when he says, Hashem, I am a Chassid. Is he meant to tell him, am I not righteous in your eyes? You see? I mean, how many times did I tell our people, let's say the time of the Selihot. That's 40 days of Selihot every day. Let's say you could sleep up to 7 o'clock. Instead, we wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Whether you sleep at midnight or not, you wake up at 5 o'clock. People who are not religious, they don't bother to wake up for Selihot. They can wake up at 8 o'clock, they can wake up at 7. But we take away from our sleep 1 hour every day for 40 days. That puts us on such a level that for the whole year we have definitely a tremendous privilege and a great consideration in the eyes of Hashem. Why is that? I think in this generation we can understand King David more than any other generation. Because the problem of this generation is sleep. Why? People go to sleep very late. And then you have to wake up early. Some people, like it says in the Gemara, Ashrenu matov halkenu, how happy we are that everybody wakes up to go directly to his job, to his work, when we wake up first to go to synagogue to greet Hashem. That's the difference. 1 hour for 40 days before Kippur. That puts you on a pedestal. Mamash. So David HaMelech felt the same. I don't sleep just because of your honor, Hashem. Well, compare me with the other kings. Who's better? So am I not deserving your protection? That's according to the interpretation of Rabbi Levi. Let's see what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying. Ve'idach in Hebrew, in Aramaic means, and what about the opinion of the second one? The second one is Rabbi Yitzchak. כך אמר דוד לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, לא חסיד אני, שכל מלכי מזרח ומערב יושבים אגודות בכבודם, ואני ידיי מלוכלכות בדם ובשפיר ובשיליה, כדי לטהר אישה לבעלה. The interpretation of Rabbi Yitzchak goes in a different direction, also describing the great piousness of David, for which he had the right to say to Hashem, Hashem, I deserve your protection because I am a Chassid. You know that I am a Chassid in this vein means I sacrifice a lot. And the king, he could have enjoyed his life in a way that he can enjoy his sleep and enjoy many things. Instead, he's giving up on many things that their life has to offer in order to serve the Lord. Don't I deserve your protection? So Rabbi Yitzchak saying, this is what David meant. Whenever there is a debate like this, it means both of them were meant. That's how the system of the Talmud, how to understand. It means both of them. Hashem, which means David is saying to Hashem, I am your Chassid. Now, you, Hashem, you know everything, therefore you should explain to yourself that I am this and I am that also. I am that Chassid according to Rabbi Levi, and I am that Chassid according to Rabbi Yitzchak. What is it that Rabbi Yitzchak said? So he said to Hashem, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, am I not Chassid? Am I not deserving of your protection because I am righteous? Why am I righteous? All the kings of the world, Mizrach u'Ma'arav, of the east and the west, Yoshvim agudot b'chvodam. Every day they go with their families to the court, the kingly, to the royal court, and they sit down with all their honor. Everyone is giving him honor and giving him consideration and gifts and everything. That's how the world, and that's how the kings of then. Maybe not today, but the kings of then, that's how they used to be. But what about me? I am a king, and David was not a small king. Even in the eyes of the kings of the world, he was known as one of the greatest kings of the world. The world was terrified of David. David was unbelievable, King David. So he said to him, Look upon all the kings of the universe. How they are enjoying themselves every morning. When they come with all the honors, Habibi. Fani. At that time, what do you think I am doing, Hashem? Don't you see what I am doing? Instead of enjoying the pleasure of my royalty, in fact, at that time, my hands are full of blood. What blood? Yaday melukhlachot bedam. My hands are dirty with blood. Which blood? Beshapir ufshilya. Those are two words that have to do with the sack that the baby, before it is, when the woman is about to give birth, there is a bag that the baby comes out with it, maybe. That's called Shapir and Shilya. It's all full of blood, and that's where the baby is. So, but sometimes you have to understand that there are two kinds of blood. There is a blood that comes in the woman, of course. I'm talking about women. The blood that comes because of her period. And if she has blood from the source, from that source, then she is tameh. She is not kosher. She is immediately separating from her husband for at least 2 weeks, you know that. But there are another kind of blood. The kind of blood that she could see during her pregnancy. In her pregnancy, she doesn't have a period, usually. So in case she sees any kind of blood, it could be the kind of blood that we call dam tohar. It's a kosher blood. It doesn't make her tameh. It's a long story. In Masechet Nida, Baruch Hashem, we have a whole volume, a whole tractate of the Gemara, Masechet Nida, one of the toughest of the Talmud, that discuss those things. But in the meantime, let's say the woman saw blood. And let's say that blood didn't come at the time of her period. It came in that time in which it's not her period. So what should she do now? Should she consider it kosher and therefore not to separate from her husband? Because it could come from a different, maybe because of a wound, maybe because of a different area. That doesn't mean that she should be tameh. But how do you distinguish between one blood and the other? Even today, by the way, this problem, there is such a thing. Many times people call me in the middle of the night to tell me that she saw blood and it's not her period. What should we do? Now the problem is we have to see the blood. Some people have taken a course. There is a course that you could take. I refuse to take the course. I don't like that. But because there's so much responsibility in it. But some rabbis, they do allow themselves to do that, and they have to be very careful to distinguish, because he could tell her it's kosher and she is tameh, where in fact, or she could be tameh, and then you forbid her to be with her husband when she is kosher. That's the reason why I got out of it. So, in order to do that, you have to be very careful. David HaMelech, not only he was a great Talmid Chacham, not only he was a posek of halakha, but he also delved with this problem, checking to distinguish between one blood and the other. Do you go to the king to tell you the answer to this? Where King David was this kind of king. That people came to him, women came to him with their blood. Can you tell me if I am kosher or not? From the blood, he would see, from the color of the blood, imperceptible, there is a slight difference. He would tell her if she is kosher or not. So now David, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak, is turning to Hashem and says to Hashem, Ribbono shel Olam, Master of the universe, am I not righteous to you and deserve your protection? So, compare me with the other kings. All the other kings enjoy themselves every morning. They come, they are pampered with all kind of honorable things and things. Where am I at that time? My hands are in blood. Meluchlakot, dirty with blood. Why? Why did I take that responsibility? Kedei letaher isha leba'lah. So I can have the privilege of saying to a woman, you are kosher for her husband. There is no greater mitzvah than this. See that? That's why people allow themselves to call us even at midnight. Only, I told them, call Rabbi. So, you see, the point is this. The point is that it's a great mitzvah. If you have the ability and if you have the knowledge to do it, it's a great mitzvah to check this, so that maybe it's possible that you will tell the woman, Madam, don't worry, you are okay. And you could go back to your husband.
But it's still blood.
Still blood. But as I said before, there are two kinds of blood. Yeah. There is the kosher blood and the non-kosher blood. The blood that comes at that time of the period, or even in that interim time. In the time in which she has to wait 7 days, 7 more days, that's blood that comes still from her sickness, from the sickness of her period. But if it happened that, let's say, she was hit by something, or maybe, like it says about Rivka, when she came on the camels with Eliezer to see Yitzchak, and when Yitzchak saw her, and she saw him from far, she saw how handsome he was, she was she lost her mind, so she fell from the camel, and our sages immediately said, Naflu betuleha, her virginity went away from her, because she desired him so much. That's the way of our sages. Anyway, so the point is, yes?
If she's impure, is she impure physically or spiritually?
No. When I say that a woman is not kosher, I mean she is impure at the time, we call it the time of niddah. At the time, it's not that we tell her that you are impure. Now she knows that she cannot be with her husband, because if chas v'shalom, God forbid, let's say a woman, let's say she has 6 days or 7 days that she sees blood. At that time, there's no question about it. She's known as niddah. Niddah, she's not allowed to touch her husband, and nor her husband to touch her. She's not allowed to sleep in the same bed, even without touching. She's not allowed to even hand him a cup. She's not allowed to do many things. Right? Then after the 6 or 7 days that it takes her, you have another 7 days that she has to count. Those are known as the pure days. The days of purity, the days Shiv'ah Nekiyim. She is still not allowed. For at least 2 weeks, she is not allowed to be with her husband. And by the way, the Gemara says in Masechet Nida, don't complain, because that gives her the possibility to feel like a newlywed. Every month you get married.
Is it physical or spiritual impurity?
It's both.
It's both. Okay.
This question is not easy to answer, but it's both. Spiritually and physically, she is contaminated.
So even
now, if she, in the time of the temple, for example, when there was the truma, the food of the Kohen, if she touches the food of the Kohen, that food is tameh, finished. That's why he has to be very careful. And even today, without the case of truma, we still have all the other things. As he cannot sit in her place, he cannot, all the laws that have to do with nidah. That's not the time now to discuss. But that's the point now that King David is asking Hashem, I deserve your protection because I have done my best to serve you, the Lord. So let us conclude this way. Number one, it teaches us that one can do whatever he can to Hashem. If you do whatever you can, that your common sense is telling you, that your natural chokhmah is telling you to do, you are safe with God. Even though we commit mistakes, we make mistakes and we commit sins. Whether they are sins of desire and that we could not overcome the evil inclination, or sins by mistake or things like this, we are all prone to that. But if we do the best we can, in accordance with the energy that God gave us, in accordance with the chokhmah that God gave us, we are safe in the eyes of God. You could ask from Hashem everything. You could say that you deserve His protection, and so forth. But if a person knows, and God knows that He gave us enough common sense to know whether one does whatever he can, the best we can you say that I have done the best you can? Not everybody can say, I did my best. Even though we are used to say this kind of expression, I did my best. It's not true. Because you know how you know that you didn't do your best? Let's say you were supposed to come here at 7 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't because I had to be in my business. Right? Because the boss would be angry at me. Oh, that shows that you are more afraid of the boss than the Hashem. Okay, but still that doesn't mean that we have, maybe that's a wrong example, because we don't want anybody to lose his parnasa. But let's say you are in a situation in which it's not so terrible, you could definitely say, well, God comes first. That shows that you have done your best for Hashem, whatever you can, in accordance with the chokhmah that Hashem gave us. And then we could always say, like David says, Le'shomra nafshi ki chasid ani, Hashem, I deserve your protection because I am doing my best for you. So have a good night, my friends, and also, 3 weeks I will not be here, I will be in Israel, Be'ezrat Hashem, so I'll be missing you very much.
Can I ask a question? Why was the woman of steel be punished?
I did mention this before, that he was punished anyway because of the rumor. I told you that Hashem is very strict with the tzaddikim. If it was you or me, we wouldn't be punished in his kind of conditions. But because he was on such a level, automatically God is very strict with the righteous, to the point that